I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Lancaster County Planning Commission on March 4th, 2020. A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room, and a copy of the full agenda, including the staff reports, is available at the front of the chambers with the clerk. The Open Meetings Act is posted just inside the doors at the back of the room. If you parked in the parking garage across the street to the north, the gate is open and no parking coupons are needed. Out of courtesy for those attending this meeting, the commissioners and the staff, cellular phone usage is not permitted in these chambers during any portion of this meeting. We appreciate your cooperation. Please note the Planning Commission action today is final on the following items. 1.1, Special Permit 1151B, 4.3, Special Permit 2046B, and 4.3B, Use Permit 150C. Any aggrieved person may appeal final action of the Planning Commission to the City Council or the County Board by filing a notice of appeal with the clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission action on all other items is a recommendation to the City Council or County Board. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held February 19th, 2020.
Move to approve, Campbell.
Second, Edgerton.
Okay, I would just note that the minutes were amended to include a disclosure to pre-existing Special Permit 21I by Commissioner Finnegan, as advised by the City Attorney's Office at the last hearing. Basically, Finnegan disclosed that she had sent an email to Commissioner Beckius regarding this that application. With a question. Is that correct?
No, it was to
not
a staff person.
Oh, it was to, Tom. Okay.
Yeah, Tom.
Okay, when I saw Tom, I'm sorry. Okay, so Tom Seka. I'll
Yes.
clear that up in the minutes. Okay, so I just wanted to note that.
Okay.
We have Campbell moved and seconded by?
Edgerton.
Okay, thank you. Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried, 8-0.
The next item of business is the consent agenda. I'm not going to read all this because we're going to pull the item from the consent agenda. So I'm going to skip ahead. Is that okay, Jerry?
That's fine.
So do we want to
It will
that
be,
one first?
actually, we'll need to, we'll just note that item 1.1, Special Permit 1151B, to allow for early childhood care facility with up to 115 children on property generally located at 4717 and 4727 A Street, will be pulled from the consent agenda for a separate public hearing as item 3.1.
Okay, so I think we're ready to start.
Actually, you'll need to go ahead and
Uh-oh, hold on.
start here.
Oh. So, request for deferrals. There are no requests for deferral, so we will now proceed to public hearing. The staff will make a brief presentation. The applicant will then be requested to present his or her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, followed by those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given an opportunity to respond to the testimony, and then the applicant shall have an opportunity for rebuttal. If, during your testimony, you have copies of documents or materials you would like distributed to the Planning Commission members and/or included as part of the record, please provide that information to the clerk for distribution. Each person testifying should state their name and address and shall have 5 minutes to speak unless additional time is requested and granted. The timer will go off after 4 minutes, then you will have 1 minute to wrap up your testimony. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing unless the Commission votes to defer action or continue the public hearing. Jerry, will you please call the first public hearing item?
Yes, again, item 3.1 is Special Permit 1151B to allow for early childhood care facility with up to 115 children on property generally located at 4717 and 4727 A Street. This is final action on this item unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days. Staff recommendation is for conditional approval. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this item?
Yes.
Yes.
I emailed George this morning last minute, and thank you, George, for your response, and had some questions, and he answered them.
Great.
I had communication with a parent and board member of the applicant before I realized that this was, before this agenda was brought forward.
Okay, noted. Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting this site?
I don't see any.
Okay.
George?
Thank you, George Wesselhoff, planning staff. So our location here, this is A Street, South 48th, so we're at the southwest corner of that intersection. There is the existing Montessori school building, there's the existing parking lot. The special permit boundary includes those existing aspects as well as this new property where there's an existing house that will be removed and replaced with an approximate 46 by 39 foot building. The new building will be approximately the same size as the existing house footprint and will also be residential in appearance. So here's the new structure, which will be located on the west side of the property. The facility will utilize the existing parking located on the east side of the existing Montessori school. Access to this parking lot is off South 48th Street. And this parking lot, I should note, is owned by the church that is located to the east across South 48th Street. There is an agreement between the applicant and the church to use the existing parking, which this was the case when the first special permit 1151 for the property was approved in 1985. So the parking lot will continue to provide parking for employees as well as loading, unloading areas for children, and is satisfactory as the school and church have non-concurrent parking demands. The facility is currently approved for 60 students. This special permit expansion would increase that number to 115. So in addition to South 48th Street access, there is, with this existing house property, there's existing access off A Street. Currently, I'll go back to the aerial. Currently, there are 3 existing driveways. There's kind of a U-shaped driveway with the existing house property. Then there's a kind of a leftover driveway stub to the east. And so what will happen is the middle driveway will be removed and there will be right in, right out at the western and eastern driveways respectively. And that is a condition of approval that the middle driveway be removed, curb restored, and those access points be limited to right in, right out. And so with that, I can answer any questions you may have.
George, how are they going to ensure that that remains right in and right out? Is there going to be something put in A Street or just signs up?
As I understand it, through LTU, the right in, right out features will be physically designed so they would limit movement to turn from coming from the east. Also, A Street at that location has a double yellow line. There's not a middle turning lane, so people are not supposed to turn across that line.
Okay. Any other questions?
George, I had asked you this question, but for the benefit of everybody, that intersection becomes a nightmare about 2 or 3 times a day, maybe more, but I'm aware of 48th A and Cotner. I use it a lot to go various places north. Do we know what the impact will be on those streets? Will it add considerably to the traffic congestion? And that may be more for, I think I saw Bob here.
Yes, LTU did look at this. Lincoln Transportation and Utilities Department did review this. And I know, and this is outside of this particular project, but there is a long-term plan with respect to intersection improvements in this area that LTU can also address.
Okay. He's coming.
Bob Simmering, LTU. We did look at this. Obviously, any increase in traffic at a congested location is always a problem. This is not a commercial type of operation that's going to cause an increase continuously. However, there will be the morning and the afternoon drop-off times that are impacted. The right in, right out does help a lot because it's typically the left turn that congests traffic. And in the larger picture, the thing George is referring to is there is a federal aid project that is just in the planning stages that addresses 3 intersections, what we're going to call the triangle. This 48th, 50th, and South Cotton are at 48th. And the impact is that if you just fix or do something at one intersection, you don't really fix the problem, but doing this is more of a regional type of project that we think is going to have a very beneficial impact on the whole neighborhood.
Do you know when that's going to be done?
Well, we expect it to be done within 5 years.
George, do you know when the kids are going to be dropped off primarily, or are they going to be, they're not spread out through the day, are they, at Montessori?
I'm not aware of that. The applicant might be able to provide that
Okay,
information.
thank you.
And similar to other childcare facilities, I mean, parents are required to park and come into the facility. Many people would use the parking lot for that. Is that correct?
So just to clarify, the access off A Street is supplemental. It's not required by the ordinance. The existing parking and loading areas on the east side of the existing school meet the requirements. So they're not required to have that additional access off A Street.
Bob, I think I remember from a long time ago talking about about the triangle. Are you thinking about roundabouts here?
All options are being considered.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, applicant.
Good afternoon. Nate Burnett with Rig Engineering, 601 Old Cheney Road, Suite A. I'll address some of the traffic concerns in the site plan, and then I'll let Jessica, who's representing the Montessori, answer some specific questions regarding the hours. George did a great job kind of setting us up here. Again, here's the overall site plan there at the southwest corner of 48th and A. We've been working with Brion and LTU regarding making sure that the ride in and ride out are able to function the way that everyone is desiring. And this is the current plan that we have turned into LTU. So we have an angled here on the left, the ingress side, so that vehicles turning left it would be very difficult to do that. And then exiting onto A Street, we also have it so that vehicles are able to easily position and get out. We did shift the furthest east drive west some, primarily just for future connectivity to whatever may happen at that intersection, being able to increase separation between the intersection and that drive we thought is important, and also for vehicles that would be able to turn right and not be right into that left turn lane. Here's a picture of with the aerial on, so pushing that back allows the vehicle to get in without being impacted too much by that left turn lane. It should be mentioned that code requires only 4 vehicles stacking. We're showing 5 vehicles being able to be stacked. For this specific site, a max of 31 kids will be there. 18 would be dropped off. So the overall impact is going to be, we feel, very minor. And they also have some dedicated personnel to go out and get people, bring the kids in, so that the timing of everything goes pretty smoothly. And if there's any specific questions, I'll have Jessica come up and answer specific hours and how that all works.
Jessica Greenwald, attorney for Montessori School for Young Children, 121 South 13th, Suite 800. Just to expand a little bit on what Nate had said about hours, and just the general design of the facility, there's actually going to be two facilities. The current facility, and they will not be adjoined. So the current facility, any children that are being dropped off there will be utilizing that parking lot to the east, and we're already doing that. And as a disclaimer, my child goes there, so I actually participate in this drop-off daily. So we actually have already trained our parents on that 48th Street. We're already a right in, right out there, and we've trained our parents pretty well to know that that's, a requirement that we've got. So we feel confident that we'll be able to do the same thing on that A Street. With that new facility, as Nate said, there are actually only going to be 18 students at any given time that would be dropped off at that particular location, and that is for our preschool program. Our toddlers will still, which will, I think, make up, and I think it's 15 children, will make up then and come through the parking lot on the east side. So any of those parents have to park and actually walk their students in. The toddlers, as part of the Montessori education, the teachers come out and they actually take the kids from the vehicle. So it's a pretty smooth transition, and it happens pretty quickly. So that 5-car stacking, I think we're pretty confident that we won't have stacking on A Street itself. It'll be able to happen within the drive.
So where do we get the 116 children number?
So at any given time, so we've got, basically what we had done is we may be serving 115 children at any given time, although they will not be occupying the facility. So we've got the ability in that school for kids to either go full-time or they can go half-day. So if we had every child going half-day, we would have up to 115 students, and that's what we wanted to provide for.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions for the applicant right now? Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Testimony in support of this application. Testimony in support. Okay, testimony in opposition. All right. Any further questions for staff? No? Okay, applicant, think of anything in that short time? Okay. All right.
I would move that we close the public hearing.
Second, Finnegan?
Jerry?
Okay. Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0.
I would move to approve trying to come up with the number for you.
1151B.
Thank you. 1151B.
Second, Finnegan?
Discussion.
My concerns have been well answered on traffic.
Yeah.
And that intersection is a mess, so I think they've come up with a good solution.
I do too. And I want to thank George again for his quick response last minute. So, yeah.
This is in my neighborhood, so I drive this area frequently, and I know that a lot of time has gone into this project, and I really want to thank the Montessori for designing their building so that it will fit in the neighborhood if they ever leave this location. That's really huge to us in the neighborhood, and I really appreciate that. So I'm in full support. I know the intersection is crazy, but hopefully with the federal aid project, we'll get some of that relieved.
And I would concur with my commissioners, but also add that the Montessori School, for years and years and years, has illustrated a dedication to making sure that its students and are safe here at this location, and making sure that the impact of their facility is not overly burdensome upon the existing neighborhood, and we appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Jerry?
Okay, this is for the conditional approval of special permit 1151B. And this, again, is final action on this item unless appealed to the city council within 14 days. Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0. Okay, the next item is item 4.1, Comprehensive Plan Conformance 20001, to review as to conformance with the 2040 Lincoln Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan, a proposed amendment to the Lincoln Center redevelopment plan to add the 13th and O Street redevelopment project to include renovation and rehabilitation of existing buildings to add upper floor housing on property generally located at 1317, 1319, and 1325 O Street. Staff recommendation is a finding of conformance with the comp plan. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed?
I don't see any.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting the site?
Nope. Okay, Mr. Marvin.
Good afternoon, Dan Marvin with Urban Development. This is the Central Hotel 13th and O redevelopment project, and it's seeking comprehensive plan conformance. The project redevelops 3 parcels, the subway, this building, and this building, which used to function as a hotel at one time. And what it will change it into are 22 living units on the 2nd and 3rd floor. There will be 10 studio apartments, 8 one-bedrooms, one bedroom with a den, and 2 two-bedroom units. The project will work to restore the original facade. So we didn't magically put the facade back on there. This has been photoshopped with brick. It could look a little different, but this is to give you the impression of what they're trying to return it back to. It was reviewed yesterday by the Urban Design Committee, and they recommended approval as well. It's consistent with the goals of the comprehensive plan, the downtown master plan, the Lincoln Center redevelopment plan, and the developer's attorney, Mr. Houston, is here, and I think he'd like to be able to speak a couple of words, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Tom Houston. My address is 233 South 13th Street, Suite 1900. I'm appearing before you today on behalf of O Street Holdings, which is owned by Jeff Overturf. Mr. Overturf was able to assemble these 3 properties, and absent that, this project would not be in front of you. I know prior developers have looked at these buildings and tried to renovate them, but the collection, the aggregation of the 3 buildings allows this project to move forward. The real point that I really wanted to cover with you pertains to the question that's presented to you, and I have a cost-benefit analysis, because the question that is posed to the Planning Commission is whether or not this amendment to the redevelopment plan is consistent with the general plan of development for the community. And Director Marvin is correct. It certainly is consistent with the comprehensive plan. It's consistent with the downtown master plan that was adopted in 2018, and it is consistent with the Lincoln Center redevelopment plan. There's 2 aspects that I wanted to talk about, really. Number 1 is the additional housing. The aggregation of these 3 buildings allows, it's not like the floors line up perfectly, but we can make it one project with 2 access points, so all 22 units will be under one ownership and really one entryway. And these will be smaller units. They're predominantly studio units and one-bedroom units that will be smaller, obviously, and therefore more affordable for downtown workforce housing. And that's really the component that I wanted to emphasize with respect to the downtown master plan. And it talks about the provision of additional affordable housing in downtown. The other thing about the downtown master plan, one of the catalyst projects you may recall was the ultimate renovation of O Street. And frankly, this is the second project that's moving forward. I know that there is design underway, but this project, I think, demonstrates, in addition to some of the others that are moving forward, that there is a lot of interest in O Street, and it's good to see these projects move forward. What I handed out is the cost-benefit analysis. Since 2017, the Planning Commission now is supposed to consider the cost-benefit analysis when examining the redevelopment plan amendment and whether it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. And there's 2 aspects that I wanted to touch on. My client anticipates the total investment of this project is going to be approximately $2.5 million. We believe that the incremental value created by the 22 apartments will be approximately $2 million, and that the incremental tax amount on an annual basis would be $42,000. That $42,000 per year will then be divided and collected by the city, and then ultimately paid to the redeveloper for reimbursement of the eligible expenses, which include site acquisition costs and demolition costs and facade enhancement costs, and also window replacement costs. The cost-benefit analysis also is, we're supposed to look at other impacts of the project on other factors within the community. For example, one they were supposed to examine is public infrastructure. Obviously, this isn't going to cost the city anything. This is the one thing that you will notice. There's no trees in front of the buildings under this facade picture, because those are ash trees, and those ash trees are scheduled for removal, I believe, next fall of 2020. But as a part of the downtown design work, I think increased or improved and replacement streetscape will be part of that project. The other aspects that we're supposed to be examining under the cost-benefit analysis includes whether or not there's any impact on employment, and I believe this will be good workforce housing for downtown employees. And lastly is we're supposed to examine whether or not there's any impact on student population. This is not family housing. This is kind of one-bedrooms and studios that we think will have no impact on student populations at Lincoln Public Schools. The intent of the developer is that work through the city process and ultimately for a redevelopment agreement. I think we're scheduled for April, and he would like to start work as soon as possible thereafter, now that he has assembled all the properties. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Dick?
Tom, is the apartment areas going to be sprinkled?
Yes, it's a code requirement. And that's why assembling 3 buildings and spreading that cost over 3 buildings for 22 apartments is beneficial and allows the project to occur.
Okay, thank you.
And they're all vacant now, is that correct? It's all vacant?
Other than some pigeons, I suppose. There's no...
The Central Hotel houses many pigeons.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, factually, there's some interesting facades that are going to be revealed too. I think that's one of the tenets of the downtown master plan too, is to restore original facades along those streets, and we have a developer here that wants to do so. So it's good. It's good when those things happen. We don't always plan for that. So.
You mentioned a little bit about not focused at student housing, and kind of along that affordable housing aspect that's mentioned in the plans. What kind of, are you going to do market rates for rent? What do you expect?
Well, I think they will be market rate units, but just because of the nature that they are smaller, and I think the market for those types of studio apartments makes them much more affordable for the workers in downtown Lincoln.
And then, so this is just kind of semantics, and I think I might have figured out the answer. So are we calling it the hotel project because it used to be a hotel? Because I was like expecting a hotel application when I was reading this. I was like, this isn't a hotel.
One of the, we rarely disagree on these kinds of projects, but we couldn't agree on a name here. 13th and O seemed a little too generic to me, and so I was advocating, let's name it after the prior usage, which was the Citra Hotel. That's why it's kind of halfway in between, I suppose.
Sure. Okay. Is the entryway going to be on O Street, or will it be on the backside?
The good thing about it, that there is an entryway right here between 1319 and 1317, and there's also an entryway here at 1325, so there's 2 entryways. One of the other things that this presents an opportunity, there's a plan for some deck space
nice.
Above the 1319 building as a common area for the residents.
Okay. Any other questions?
Will the existing businesses be displaced?
No.
They'll stay, okay.
No, and someone has asked the question whether or not the residents be disturbed by the noise of the businesses that are on the first floor. I would hope they'd go into it with their eyes wide open and their ears wide open and understand where they're renting an apartment. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, I would be more concerned about tenants know there could be noise later at night being in these locations.
And then it did mention in here that parking was in nearby garages. Is there an agreement in place, or will that be seeked out in the future?
We're working on the redevelopment agreement, but obviously the city has acquired the leasehold interest for the Eagle Garage at 14th and N, and we're looking for to reserve 22 stalls in that garage for residential use.
Excellent, thank you.
Any other questions right now? Okay,
Thank you.
Testimony in support of this project. Testimony in support. Testimony in opposition? No? Okay, well, any further staff questions?
Nope.
Anything you want to, kind of staff and applicant are kind of the same, not really, but sort of. Okay,
I would move that we close the public hearing.
Second, Joy.
Jerry?
Okay, Campbell,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Finnegan,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Ryman Yost,
Yes.
Shear,
Yes.
Beckius.
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Motion carried, 8-0.
I would move that we find the application 20001 is in conformance with the comprehensive plan.
Second, Finnegan.
Discussion.
This project, or this finding, checks a lot of boxes, as Dan spoke about, regarding the planning processes that have happened previous to now, including a lot of master plan related studies and obviously just redevelopment for downtown Lincoln and dreams and goals. So I'll support this.
I agree with Commissioner Shear. It checks off a lot of boxes. I'm excited that we're going to bring that historical facade back. I always like that kind of stuff. And I think that it will really help with keeping O Street active and having that active activity out there. So I'll support it. Jerry?
Okay, this is for finding of conformance to the comp plan for comprehensive plan conformance number 20001. Campbell,
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Finnegan.
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Ryman Yost,
Yes.
Shear,
Yes.
Beckius.
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Motion carried, 8-0. Okay, item 4.2 is comprehensive plan conformance 20002 to review as to conformance with the 2040 Lincoln Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan, a proposed amendment to the Lincoln Center redevelopment plan to add the greater downtown principal corridors redevelopment project to enhance streetscape and other amenities to the principal corridors in downtown on publicly and privately owned property generally located from N to P streets, from 9th to 28th streets, and from 9th to 10th streets, from M to S streets. Staff recommendation is a finding of conformance with the comp plan. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this item?
I don't see any.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting the site to be disclosed?
No. All right. Who's going to go first?
Good afternoon, Dan Marvin and Hallie Salem, and we're going to tag team because we have 16 slides.
Wow.
And we don't want to tax your time, so we'll try to go through as quickly as we can. This is an introduction to entryway corridors. It's a strategy to be able to make improvements in our downtown area. First slide up.
And we're just, there we go. And we're going to try and keep it under 5 minutes each if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So the first slide up just kind of goes through what is an entryway corridor TIF district and how is it paid for. We start with a base year where the base year would be 0, and then the natural increases in valuations through that corridor will result in an increment that then flows back that we can use to make improvements into the district. Has this ever been done before? And the answer is we did this on North 27th Street. We currently have an entryway district on West O right now, and we're receiving that increment. We've done a master plan for West O, and we'll be making the improvements.
We've got 7 main reasons for doing this district. The first one was brought up by Tom Houston in terms of the 2018 Downtown Master Plan, and that these improvements would help identify create an identity for the downtown entryways. And then also because of the removal of the 43 ash trees along O Street and around the corners along O Street this fall.
So what you can see on this slide is you'll see some yellow dots, and the yellow dots are the ash trees that would come down. Those are the largest canopied trees along O Street, so not only are we losing 43 trees, we're losing 43 of the largest trees through that corridor, and we think this creates an opportunity and an urgency to address this by using an entryway district.
And then some of the other reasons include some of these high-traffic crossings like 27th and O, revitalization of some deteriorating sidewalks and crosswalks in the area, as well as landscape beds, just creating a vibrant streetscape for connectivity and safety. And then also, we hope that this vibrancy will then help encourage further redevelopment along O Street.
So some of the improvements that we need to address would be sidewalks and crosswalks. Some of the pavers are in need of repair. Landscaping beds, we've gone through and done a lot of due diligence of the condition of the landscaping beds so that we understand that, but the entryway district could help refurbish those. Obviously, we've talked about the trees, some of the amenities through there. Some of the benches are old, and I think in that particular one, there's no slats in the benches, so if you'd sit, you'd be sitting on the ground.
And then there's 5 key priorities for the district funding. The entryway enhancements for demarcating the entrances to and within downtown, street crossing improvements, particularly on 9th and 10th Street, as well as a couple key intersections throughout, streets and streetscape improvements, strategic alley improvements, and then enhancing the interaction between the private property and the public realm through facades and other types of improvements.
So the district that's laid out runs off of the I-180 bridge down to about the city campus. So between the 9th and 10th Street corridor, it starts at 9th Street and it runs out to just past 27th. We take it to 28th Street because if we need to be able to use the funds within the intersection of 27th Street, we will go one block past that. And that is the district that we would propose goes forward.
Can you go back to that slide? What's
Sure.
the difference between the blue and the yellow?
So there's we can get into the 2 redevelopment plan areas, but there's the Lincoln Center redevelopment plan area and the Antelope Valley redevelopment plan area. And we're trying to separate the funding in that manner.
I see, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll actually have 2 districts, or 2...
They'll all be in the same pot, but we'll proportion it out between the 2 districts.
So each district will pay for its own improvements within it. The master planning will be able to do the whole area, which is the other reason why we wanted to go to 27th Street, so that we have, while the funding within the Antelope Valley may be smaller than what's in the downtown, we'll be able to implement a common vision for the whole area. Some of the other funding sources that we have irrigation funds that we put into the CIP project currently. We have other downtown improvement CIP projects that would be going. There are funds within the Parks Department to pay for the replacement of trees. There would be street rehab dollars that could go into this area. There are other future projects that would be in this area, and I think we need to speak a little bit about how a new project comes in, just like the one that was being voted on. That project then gets identified and is taken out of the district, and it creates its own funding mechanism. But those types of projects that would come into the district, then we would expect them to assist in some of the entryway dollars and doing out the master plan that we would create from this.
Can I ask a question? So if that were to happen, I'm sure it will happen, you will, in your department, have an opportunity during the redevelopment negotiation process to identify things that you would want to do for this out of that new project TIF funding? Is that how you would earmark that?
So if we come up with a common plan that goes from 9th Street to 28th Street, we would be able to then apportion out the cost of doing that plan to the individual properties that come out of the district.
Perfect, yeah.
For example, 9th and O already has money dedicated in that project for O Street and for 9th Street.
And that could transfer over to this specific
And that can transfer over
process.
to completing the goals of the project.
Got it.
And the last bullet on there is assessment districts. So is there a way that we can do alley assessments to help cover some of the costs, but then also come in and assist with TIF financing to do a cost-sharing arrangement? I think what a lot of people don't understand is that the city does not have line items to pay for alley improvements.
Mm-hmm.
And the other important point to understand too, on sidewalk improvements, the amount of money that we put into the budget for sidewalk improvements is about $1 million a year, and what I'm told is the backlog is about $80 million. So there's a tremendous backlog for sidewalk improvements. We think in this area can help assist in the overall city by relieving some of those sidewalk improvements.
So Andrew did an excellent job of going through how this conforms with the comprehensive plan. Just wanted to touch on a few key points in terms of also the sub-area plans. It's being central. This project is central and a catalyst project of the 2018 Downtown Master Plan. It's also overlaps with the Lincoln Center redevelopment area, the Antelope Valley redevelopment area, and the North 27th Street Corridor redevelopment area. And those are shown on this plan, as well as the greater downtown on this map, as well as the greater downtown area in gray. And so the comprehensive plan specifically mentions the primary entryway corridors of 9th, 10th, and O Street, and improving that public infrastructure, enhancing the entryways, and creating a vibrant streetscape. The South Haymarket Neighborhood Plan is another sub-area plan of the comprehensive plan, and that specifically talks about 9th and 10th Street and making improvements to those streets, street trees, area between the cars, the traffic, and the pedestrian way, and making those public improvements and bump outs for shorter intersection crossings. And then the master plan, like I said, talks about that front door to downtown, recommends facade improvements, streetscapes enhancements, and reuse and rehab of underutilized and vacant spaces. And then it specifically talks about creating this district within 18 months of adoption of the downtown master plan as a short-term project. So we're just in under the wire of that 18 months creating that district. And then it talks about, Andrew talked about the 3 redevelopment plans that allow us to use TIF for this area. So the Antelope Valley redevelopment plan does talk about those streetscape elements, pedestrian comfort, and mitigating the effects of large number of vehicles. The Lincoln Center redevelopment plan and creating that active, lively 24/7 atmosphere, and then further strengthening downtown as this center of the city. And then the North 27th Street Corridor specifically talks about the 27th Street intersection of 27th and O, and creating these pedestrian linkages with the neighborhoods.
So what's our schedule? We have had a number of meetings. We had a meeting with the downtown that we did at the Bourbon Theater. We did a neighborhood meeting over at NeighborWorks. We've had other forms of public engagement to inform people of where we're at. The Planning Commission meeting is on the schedule. What we would hope to is be able to get this before City Council this spring. And then we would start the district in June. Our goal would be, the first phase would be to start master planning, engage a designer to do some of the work, which would address the sidewalks, the streetscape improvements. the planting beds, a whole variety of things. And to be able to follow in maybe as early as spring of next year, because this fall the trees would be taken down, so we'll be able to make an assessment of what phases and how to phase the project. And one phase might be to go in and replace the trees that have been taken down in the planting beds that it makes sense to be able to do those in. And then we've opened it up for questions.
I have one question. I know you and other departments talk all the time about how to fund maintenance. And I believe I'm right on this. You've taught many of us, you and Dallas and others. I don't think TIF can be used for maintenance, right? That's capital improvement. So talk about the strategy for once this all comes together, how it can be maintained.
So, I mean, because it's in the downtown and because have a BID district that covers much of the downtown,
Yeah.
we've got a great maintenance program.
Good.
And one of the elements that we believe is going to happen as Telegraph District opens up is that the BID will expand to the east. Will it get all the way to 27th Street? No, but it will certainly cross, at some point it will cross 17th Street, cross out to the Antelope Valley Road, and then cross the Antelope Creek to connect into Telegraph District. So as the BID district grows, the ability to maintain this area will also be enhanced as well.
Perfect.
And we do have some other mechanisms for maintenance, working with adjacent developers on enhanced maintenance, as well as those two established CIP line items for the downtown irrigation and the downtown area improvements as things need to be replaced.
Could endowments have a role in here with redevelopment type projects?
Absolutely. It would be something that we would have to rely on a contribution from an outside source, something other than TIF, to contribute to the endowment. So we could look at those potential ways of raising endowment funds.
Thanks.
In the staff report, it talks about cultural amenities. Can you kind of give me some examples of what you guys have in mind, if anything?
So in terms of entryway signage, that might be a good location for those types of cultural amenities, as well as streetscape enhancements. So for example, with the Lumber Works block, around the 8th and N substation, there were plaques put in along the streetscape talking about the history of the district, and pointing at some of the immigration that had happened in the South Salt Creek neighborhood, and pointing at the Park Middle School and some of the other interesting aspects of the neighborhood in the area. So that could be an opportunity to incorporate some history, some cultural aspects of the community within the district as part of a streetscape or entryway feature.
Another thing that caught my eye was the mention of conflict-free pedestrian connections. Can you give examples of that? Are you talking like bump outs?
Well,
are you meaning
jetpacks? We were, we're gonna graduate from scooters to jetpacks.
There is a goal being talked about within the city, I think as part of the 2050 comprehensive plan for zero traffic fatalities and reduction of injuries, and I think that's the goal. And the aim that we would look at ways to reduce those pedestrian vehicular conflicts by reducing crossing distances. There are other ways, like a pedestrian scramble at certain intersections that other cities use. I'm not saying necessarily that we would do that here, but where you would have a red light at all stops.
So then you can cross in any direction.
So there's a lot of different technology, different ways to look at pedestrian improvements. There are experts here in the field of traffic that I am not an expert in, so I don't want to promise that we're doing a pedestrian scramble, but that is there are certainly opportunities to use what others are doing
But in the interim, I think anybody that's walked in the downtown areas and across the streets, you know that there's a number of undulations in the walkway going across the street, so an opportunity to try to smooth that out, signage opportunities to try to make it easier for people to get across the street. I think we'll be able to do all of those things within the district as well.
Go ahead.
Question for you. The other districts that have used this mechanism for streetscape and landscaping improvements were mentioned in your presentation, and I'm going to direct this to Ms. Salem just because she's been there a little bit longer than you, Mr.
fine.
Marvin. I hope you don't mind at all. But when we think of data-driven decision-making, does the department have any resource that the general public can look at and say, the city has made these improvements, this is what followed after these improvements were made, so that if a community member were to say, golly, are these improvements worthwhile?
Sure.
Is there any sort of data that the department has that you might be able to share with us in terms of what those improvements do to a general sub-area or what have you?
Sure. Actually, there is one key example with P Street. There was a Landscape Architects Association, and Dennis is probably going to have to clarify the actual association name, but I think it's Association of Landscape Architects.
It's the Landscape Architecture Foundation under the ASLA, American Society of Landscape Architects.
So they did a study on P Street, an evaluation, a summary of information before and then evaluation after, to show that there was actually an increase in activity, pedestrian activity, as well as facade improvements and use of retail space, street frontage along the P Street retail corridor. So that's one example. Now, have we included evaluation efforts in all of our projects? No. And we could do that if it was desired, but because of the wanting to spend dollars on the biggest bang, I think what we have tried to do over time is concentrate those dollars based on recommendations of consultants that it does do those does make a difference, both in terms of pedestrian activity and connectivity and investment. And I think we have generally seen in districts a substantial increase in investment in those districts when there is public infrastructure invested in.
Sure. I would love in the future to see the outcomes of the P Street study incorporated in some of these, because I think sometimes, and I will disclose, I did attend a meeting by Mr. Marvin given at the Bourbon Theater many months ago that I forgot. But one of the some of the feedback that I had heard at that meeting is, you know, how can we quantify the return on investment, if you will? Because I think for some members of our community, the question becomes, if we're using TIF to finance these as the mechanism of finance here, you know, what's the end result in terms of increased value that we're going to see? I mean, how much more of an increase are we seeing versus a natural increase in valuation that we would have seen if we would have done no improvement whatsoever?
Right. And some of our improvements tend to be more, when we evaluate it, tend to be more qualitative in nature than quantitative.
Sure.
For example, crossing 9th Street. Were there fatalities in the past 5 years? No. But were there close calls? And does it discourage people from crossing 9th Street? Yes. So how we qualify some
versus
of these
quantify it
versus
Sure.
quantify some of these activities, it gets into a little bit more of a difficult area, but we can see over time that the exponential increase in land values and then the redeveloper coming to make an investment based on, in part, on some of these improvements we're making.
Sure. I did see in the report mention of facade improvements. Specifically, I think I saw lighting and signage improvements. Anything maybe potentially beyond that? I think I did see some reference in there that if a private partner here in our community wanted to invest something in their building, but maybe not to the caliber that would require a TIF redevelopment agreement, that there may be some public funding here via this mechanism in order to help them with facade improvements. Is that correct? Beyond maybe lighting and signage, but maybe brick facade, restoration, what have you?
So that fifth item, that interface between the public and private realm, we're thinking of that as being that facade component, awning component, other sort of that kind of crossover between the public and private realm, where we would have a public facade easement over the building in place as a result of those improvements, so we can explain the public benefit of that type of improvement, opening windows on the first floor to create a retail space and an interaction with the sidewalk, eyes on the street, those types of improvements. So we haven't worked out those details.
Sure. But a real direct also increase in property value as well.
Absolutely.
So,
I got to interject, though. We have estimates as the total amount of funds that could come in off through this district, and the low-end estimate is $5 million. So I don't think we want to, start promising that we can do more than we're capable to do.
Sure,
Our
of
first
course.
priorities are going to be sidewalk improvements, streetscape improvements, address the trees that have come down, and then as we get to those fourth and fifth priorities, we would, if there's funds available, if we can leverage the dollars that we do have effectively, we would definitely be able to look to those. But they're lower priorities because of the limited amount of funds that we have.
Sure.
to
No,
do this.
I concur completely. Because of the funding mechanism and trying to determine a conformance with the comprehensive plan, which I think obviously we're meeting here. Sometimes I do wonder if people in our community, because of the funding mechanism involved, do want that quantification, dollars and cents wise. One other thing that I'll mention, I did see reference to a music corridor on 14th from O to P. I think in terms of a potential, bang for your buck, if you will, especially in terms of a possibility of creating an area there that then could be used for economic development purposes long term. That's really a sweet spot. I know there have been many people in this community talking about that particular area for quite a while. I saw it in the report, and I would be remiss if I did not say, wow, I think that could be a real hot spot for these dollars in particular, and seeing what we might be able to do as a community to and of course this was mentioned in the downtown master plan, but also seeing what we can do to that particular block so that when people in our community do want to close off that street, that it's not such a burdensome and expensive process to go through when you do the event permitting and the shutting down the street and what have you. If there are physical improvements that could be made in order to make that process maybe less expensive or easier to do, so that we can utilize that area in a more intensive use on a more regular basis.
Completely agree, and that's part of the reason why we created the area from N to P, was that music district now is largely encompassed within the entryway, the principal corridors, TIF district. So that is part of the plan, part of the design plan, that music district design would be incorporated into that, and then we'd continue working with Downtown Lincoln Association and the planning department to implement that music district.
I'm very excited with the possibility of that. So
am I.
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay. So, since you guys are both the staff and the applicant, testimony and support. Testimony and support. Okay, testimony and opposition. All right, well.
I would move that the public hearing be closed.
Second, Edgerton.
Okay. Campbell,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Finnegan,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Ryman Yost,
Yes.
Shear,
Yes.
Beckius,
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0.
I would move that we find 20002 in compliance with the comprehensive plan.
Second, Finnegan.
I'm going to support this. As the previous application, I think this checks a lot of boxes. But there's one other thing that I think is important as part of the discussion here in terms of my support and hopefully our commission in deliberating this. As I recall, because I was a fourth-year architecture student at the time, I think that the core blocks of O Street were done when the ash trees were planted and the crosswalks and some of the brick pedestrian node areas were done, was 1975 or 1976. I think that's about right. Dallas is shaking his head. So that's almost a 50-year-old improvement that we still have in place. Capital improvements, that's a long time for a capital improvement to exist without modification. Now, in the mid-1990s, some of that was modified to a slight degree. There were some planting beds and things done and some lighting, but for the most part, at least in the core blocks of O Street, we're looking at a 50-year-old project that is in sore need of some new planning and some new funding. So I'm going to support this. I think it's great for Lincoln. I think O Street, as we've talked about now for two previous projects ago or items, O Street's really a great aspect or part of our city, and I think this just is going to really help.
You're here.
I think that O Street is vital to our city, and a lot of people, recognize that and utilize that when they're coming in from town, so I think, from out of town. So I think that that's important to keep this, up to date and looking good and all that kind of good stuff, and this will help do that.
Are you okay if and I do believe that this is really what we need to be encouraging, especially with the ash trees being removed. And if you look back at that study that was performed, I just wrote down some of the statistics with that, the reduction in carbon, stormwater runoff, it reduced crossing times over 40%. Then valuations over 10% were raised. It increased the perception of safety, and I think that's hugely important as we travel on O Street and the areas there. And then it also did reduce the vacancy rates. So this really does bring a lot to the city of Lincoln, and I will be supporting it also.
I'll just add that the study that Christy was referring to, that P Street study, is available. And we can get that out to people somehow if they want it.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Jerry, I think we're ready to vote.
Okay, this is for a finding of conformance with the comprehensive plan for comprehensive plan conformance number 20002, which adds the Greater Downtown Principal Corridors redevelopment project to the Lincoln Center redevelopment plan. Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Raymond Yost?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0. Okay, I will call the next two items together, but before I do that, I will note that Commissioner Shear has declared a conflict of interest on these two items and will recuse himself at this time. Item 4.3A, a special permit 2046B to allow for the removal of the land use trip generation table and the associated use permit 150C to remove the land use trip generation table, both on property generally located at South 84th Street and Highway 2. I would note that this is also final action on these two items unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days. Staff recommendation for both is approval. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these items?
I don't see any.
Good afternoon, Brian Will, Planning
Hold
Department.
on.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting the site?
Okay. No, I don't see any.
Okay.
Okay, now we're ready.
I'm sorry, I'm just so eager, I just can't wait.
Excited.
Okay, this probably sounds a little familiar because we talked about this area just a few weeks ago. We're talking about Appian Way Regional Center, Phase 2, south side of Nebraska Highway 2, South 84th Street. So it's that shopping center southeast of the intersection. It's a combined report for 2 zoning overlays. Use permit 150C, which is outlined in this map. There is a second one in your packet that then outlines the special permit for the H4 planned service commercial. This would have all been, just a side note, would have all been B5, except early on they'd anticipated getting mini storage in here, and at the time you couldn't do that in B5, so split zoning, separate use permit, special permit, in the attempt to facilitate that. So I was saying, this probably sounds familiar because if you recall a few weeks ago, the administrative amendment 19070, which was approved by the planning director, was appealed to the planning commission. And that was an appeal over, actually, a change in the land use table that we're going to be talking today for this lot right here. Change in the land use to allow a local company, Gotcha Covered, to go in. That approval is appealed to Planning Commission. Planning Commission held a public hearing and approved that. So by the way, that was summarily, or that was within the 14-day appeal period, has been appealed to City Council. I believe that appeal is on Council's agenda for next Monday. So during that discussion of that application, in modifying this land use table, which had noted had been done many times, actually more than 17 land use table that we're talking about. And so this is the site plan, and this is the land use table here that we're talking about. We noted that it had been amended so many times over the course of these permits being approved, and the fact that it had outlived its useful life. Recall this stemmed from the original annexation agreement where a trip cap was placed on development. That trip cap being the limit of what the developer's financial participation was deemed to be. And so the trip cap was applied to both the use permit and special permit, in an attempt to make sure that, you know, the level of development out here that was paid for doesn't exceed, in fact, what occurs. So over time, as these centers, both north and south, have built out, it's become clear that they're not going to come anywhere near that. And so, in fact, and I included this as part of your packet as well. Back in 2014, the developer was granted a satisfaction of release of infrastructure obligations relative to that annexation agreement, essentially saying this developer has fulfilled his financial obligation, the infrastructure has all been installed and completed, and the terms of the agreement have been satisfied. Once that was done, it really there was really little use in maintaining this land use table any longer. And so it's been for some time now, we've been suggesting that this land use table be eliminated. And so, like I said, I think in the last hearing, we were suggesting with that amendment, as we talked about that the time has come, is probably past due to eliminate it. And so this application for you today is from the developer, the original developer, Iger Corp., which still has ownership interests out here, to in fact do that for both of these. I would note that this past Monday, considered by and approved by City Council, was a resolution to amend that original annexation agreement, which had the trip cap trip generation caps in it, to amend that annexation agreement to delete that entirely. And that was approved by the city council. So even more so today than before, we're suggesting this is obsolete and time to go. And I guess I mentioned that 17 amendments, 18 amendments. I mean, it just now has the effect of slowing down and encumbering development in the center, that if I sell one of you my lot that has a retail store and I want to open up a gas station, I'm going to have to come back through and amend this, and takes your time and effort and money as well as staff time, and really serves no purpose, so long as what you're doing is allowed in the B5 or the H4. So we're fully supporting this application and recommending approval of it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Brian?
If the council approved a resolution on such, that is not an official action.
That related to the annexation agreement.
Got it.
Okay, so separate zoning overlays here, the use permit, special permit.
Got it.
Other questions?
Brian, could you just walk us through the process as the improvements upon the land here age, and let's say a redevelopment occurs, let's say 75 years down the road? Could you walk us all through the process as to how that redevelopment would occur, and then let's say an assemblage took place, a redevelopment were to occur, and then the impact and improvements that may be necessary upon roadways at that point in time?
Well, yeah, I mean, they would occur like anywhere else. I think really what you're getting at is this developer's financial participation was in public improvements which now have been accepted by the city of Lincoln. But recall when they were out asking to annex and develop, there was nothing out here, and it was in advance of these projects, that is improving South 84th, Pine Lake Road, turn lanes and Highway 2. None of that was shown in the comprehensive plan. And so there was no way to advance those projects that quickly, 6-year capital improvements program. So there was a cost-sharing arrangement that was agreed to. So here again, those are all now public improvements, and so those would be the city's responsibility. And if 84th Street needs to be improved, or South 91st, or the water line needs to be upgraded, those are going to be City of Lincoln responsibilities. Projects need to be brought through the capital improvements program like any other, and that's it.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff right now? Okay. Applicant.
Good afternoon, members of the Planning Commission. Danae Kalkowski appearing today on behalf of Iger Corp., the developer of the shopping center out here at 84th and Highway 2. I think Brian's done a good job of kind of giving you the history of why we have the land use table and the trip table on the use permit and the special permit. We did start discussions with the Planning Department probably over a year ago about getting rid of the tables. And part of it is they were becoming a little bit more cumbersome, as today we're looking at things from a zoning perspective and the zoning use, and this trip table keep pushing us back to looking at a use category under that old 6th edition ITE manual that was, late 90s. And so it just became a little more cumbersome, and then I think maybe a little bit more opportunity for confusion too. At that time, we didn't have any formal amendments in the process that were going to bring these use permits before Planning Commission and City Council, so we were letting it go until, frankly, there became a need, because otherwise we would have just been filing applications to come through. With the appeal of Gotcha Covered amendment to both Planning Commission and now to City Council, that's caused a 3-month delay for that business to be able to get a use permit. Obviously, the need to get this cleaned up has become pretty evident. On Monday, we did ask the City Council to remove the trip cap from the annexation agreement, and we listed several reasons. I'm going to go through them real quick, but you've probably heard them from Brian. All of the developer obligations out here to install infrastructure under the annexation agreement have been completed. And in 2014, we had a satisfaction and release signed with the city that said that fact. We have a lot of development that's occurred out here over the last 20 years, and it's been a mix of uses, particularly on the north side of the highway. We've got a lot more residential uses than what might have been anticipated when we were talking about this annexation agreement back in 2001. And the intensity of the traffic and the trips is just not borne out with what we thought we might have. And so, with the numbers we have to compare now versus what were permitted under those trip caps, I think planning and LTU, we're pretty comfortable that there's no way we're ever going to meet those caps, and City Council was pretty comfortable with that also. And then removing the trip cap from the annexation agreement and then the tables from the use permit really will help streamline the development process out here, especially because we have had these uses in place for a long time now, and some of them are turning over. They're changing square footage, changing use, and as long as they're in conformance with the zoning and come in and get a building permit, they should be allowed to change that use and move forward. And so getting rid of these tables just really will streamline that process and really keep there from being any impediments to being able to change some of these properties for reuse. City Council held their public hearing on Monday, voted 6-0 to remove the trip cap from the annexation agreement, and I think that kind of effectively eliminates the need for the city to continue to keep track of trips under these permits. So for all of these reasons, and all of them Brian listed, we are asking for the removal of those tables. I will say we've only brought this forward on the south side. We hope to do the north side the next time we're coming in with a formal amendment and just tying that into something else that's coming along. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any testimony in support? Any testimony in opposition? Any questions for staff?
Yeah, I do have one quick question for staff, and I don't know if it's for Brian or for David. Other areas with trip count calculators that we know we have built improvements, we have a somewhat, even if it's a partially built environment already, that we already know are going to be way under their trip counts. Is there going to be a proactive measure to clean those up and get rid of them?
Not that we know of right now.
Is there a reason why not?
Well, I guess proactive, you mean on the part of staff or developer?
Staff.
Well, this...
I'm not talking about this application.
No, I know. No, there's no proactive effort that I'm aware of.
I'm going to back up.
I guess I was just going to add, it's not that common. There aren't that many, for one thing.
What I was going to ask is how common
yeah,
is this?
Probably 15?
No, I wouldn't say it's 15. I'd say it's a handful. Maybe 5. It's just not that common. It's just not that typical. Floor area, some sort of cap on floor area would be the typical, would be the common. But to do it by including trip generation, this center out here was just unique in a couple different ways. Scale was one of them. Lack of infrastructure around it was another. And so there just aren't that many.
I can tell you that Village Gardens had its trip counts removed.
Oh, sure. That's right. I forgot Village Gardens. Yes, several years ago.
Well,
there was one originally.
The reason I was asking was because, I wonder if it would be nice if there was some sort of mechanism, some sort of percentage standard that if we know we're not going to be hitting this, then it just automatically goes away, as opposed to something that a developer or someone has to do. Because as Danae pointed out, every time you change a use and you have this, you have to go back and go through the process, and it would provide some consistency as to how we approach this.
Well, and another criteria that could be used for judging that is the fact that if all the road improvements and the sewer improvements and all of that water have been done, there's no need for the trip count.
Yeah, and I mean, well, it's kind of a timing issue. Yeah. I mean, Village Gardens sort of came up before others because the improvements were done, and that one just reached a point where it just made sense to eliminate it. This one, I mean, that satisfaction release we were talking about was 2014, so that was a few years ago, or that wasn't that long ago. And so I think it was at about that time, it was becoming apparent that the centers were built out to a sufficient level where they're never going to pass it. They're never going to exceed those original caps that were placed on it. So it just started becoming obvious with this one. I mean, if there were others that sort of met those same criteria, reached that same threshold, then we would start suggesting it. But I can't think of another one.
Who is the departments that do the paperwork? Is that through the attorney's office?
What paperwork?
Like the paperwork in 2014?
Executive
For the
order.
release of satisfaction? Well, I think, the drafting of that, I think is by resolution or EO is law, but LTU, Lincoln Transportation Utilities, played heavily on that because we relied on them to tell us about the level of the improvements that were made, whether they were or they weren't.
Right, so that could be a mechanism in the future that triggers it, like you're saying, Tom.
Well, in that case, if we're talking about, though, a large area that is not completely built out, just because the improvements have been put in doesn't mean that you couldn't then still improve the physical space beyond the capacity of the chip generator. So that would be
True.
a problem that would be, if one were looking for a mechanism to get rid of this automatically, I would suggest that that's probably not a great solution, because then you just because the physical environment's been built doesn't mean you couldn't go beyond what the trip generator is calculated for.
Yeah, I don't know that 2014.
True.
I mean, Northside Costco wasn't.
No.
I mean, I don't know that it was developed to the level where you looked at and said, "Yeah, well, there's no way."
Is the city using trip generation at all anymore?
No, I think we would pretty much try to avoid it for the most part where we can. We haven't talked about using it for quite some time. But here again, like I said, this one was a unique circumstance. I can't say that we wouldn't ever do that again, but I think it would have to meet sort of a unique set of criteria for us to do that.
Sure.
But this one sort of points out, if you do it, you're likely going down this path, and we'll have to, engage some sort of remedy like this at some point, so.
Yep.
Other questions for staff?
Nope.
Applicant, do you need a rebuttal? Okay.
I would move that we close the public hearing.
Second, Finnegan.
Okay, so this would be closing the public hearing on both special permit 2046B and use permit 150C. Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Shear?
Oh, he's out.
Oh,
He's out.
sorry. Yes. Beckius?
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Can I make one motion on the two
Probably have to do them separately.
Yes, we need to do separate motions.
separately? I would move that we approve special permit 2046B for the removal of the land trip generation table.
Second, Beckius.
Discussion.
It makes a great deal of sense. It's all pretty well built out. There's still some spots to fill in, but it's not going to hit the trip counts.
Sure.
I agree. As soon as it becomes plainly aware the development's not going to be hitting that topmost threshold, then I think removal of the trip generation table makes total sense.
Jerry, go ahead and call the vote.
Okay, this is for the approval of special permit 2046B. Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
And Core.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
I then move that we approve the use permit 150C for removing the land use trip generation table.
Second, Beckius.
Any further discussion? Okay, Jerry?
Okay, Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
At this time, anyone wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda may do so.
Other than today, it's all staff.
I know. They might have something to say.
Anything you want to talk about? Now's your
Anything at all.
chance.
All right, call for a motion for.
Move to adjourn. Beckius.
Is that Edgerton?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, adjournment. Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
And Core?
Yes,
Motion carried, 7-0.
and we are adjourned.